talk about 2 weeks ago when we released a picture of Ryan Giggs on the front page and it caused a bit of a sting. That was on May the 22nd. That issue of the paper featured a large number of long news features that represented hours of hard and dedicated work. There was a 4-page graphic on the Edinburgh Trams fiasco, which took hours of research and probably many more hours of design. We hadn't really done anything like that before, so it was a lot of work and it was a bit tetchy at times. We also had a Scottish Rock and Roll Hall of Fame graphic, which again took hours of work. A brilliant essay by Terry Jameson, which distilled a lifetime of supporting football into a moving and illuminating piece of journalism. When the paper hit the streets, the furore it generated was about none of those things. It was all about a decision which took probably about 5 minutes. Decision to put the picture of a Premier League footballer on the front page and to name him in one of the articles inside the paper. It's kind of interesting to look back on exactly what we did on that day. It's not really accurate to say, as many news outlets said, that we identified Ryan Giggs. Really what we were doing, we're telling our readers something that many of them, probably most of them, already knew. And if they didn't know, it would have taken them seconds to find out on the internet. So, newspaper tells readers well-established fact is not usually the stuff of international headlines. But the impact from what we did derived not from what we actually published, but from the fact that we were able to publish it and from our reasons for doing so. What that story was actually about was an explosive mixture of celebrity, sex, an ongoing change in the global culture, the relationship between Scotland leaning towards the SNP and the Westminster government, and the tension between a 20th century morality and 21st century technology. It's that tension, I think, which will be a defining, if not the defining debate in modern journalism over the years to come. I think it boils down to maybe 4 interlinking strands. One is the growth and dominance of celebrity culture, not just in mass market television and down market tabloids, but in every major news platform in our culture at large. Second is the incredible growth in social networking sites and the internet, and the political values that lie at the heart of this growth. Third is the almost irreconcilable tension between the public right to know and individual rights to privacy. And fourth is the relationship between old media, which I guess would be newspapers and television, and the new media, Facebook, Twitter, and who knows what other emerging brands. If we take celebrity culture first, Sunday Herald has undertaken many difficult and possibly dangerous and certainly legally challenging investigations. MSP's expenses, Wendy Alexander's disastrous fundraising campaign, to name but 2. They've won awards. It resulted in high-profile resignations and changes to parliamentary rules. How many have I been asked to talk about on the national BBC? How many calls have I received on any of those subjects from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Al Jazeera, and Forbes magazine online? Not one. But you mentioned Ryan Giggs' alleged sexual misadventures with a former Big Brother contestant, and the world beats a path to your door. So, educated, liberal, middle-class news organisations dismiss celebrity revelations as useless tittle-tattle, but every one of them indulge in it, endorse it, and follow its rules. Why? Because it's a central part of modern culture, whether we like it or we loathe it. The relationship between celebrities and the media, and by extension the public, deserves some real analysis. Don't have time for a lot of that here, but there's a few points I'd like to make. That relationship between celebrities and the public is very often and very largely a commercial one. They use their talent to make huge sums of money, and then they add to that wealth with a raft of celebrity endorsements. They turn themselves into brands who don't have to promote themselves specifically as family men or women. They don't have to have a brand which says that they're clean living, but their name itself is enough to net millions from brands wanting to use their faces to sell products. And is it right that the power in that relationship should lie entirely with the celebrities and not at all with the public, whose money funds their lifestyles? Should we automatically assume that their right to privacy override our right to express facts or even opinions about them, especially when they themselves have done a lot to promote the celebrity culture, which is permeated every aspect of our culture. Look at the second and third points together. Those who use and eulogise social network sites do so largely under a shared political outlook. They're looking for a space in which to say what they want and when they want to say it. Any form of regulation flies in the face of that philosophy, and it's that philosophy which terrifies governments and celebrities. The notion of regulation, which has obviously been injected into the media very much recently, has got big practical problems. Whose regulations? America's? Britain's? China's? And once you decide that, how could those regulations possibly be enforced? And if they are enforced, for example, in the way Twitter has been forced to hand over details of tweets, users would then migrate to other sites which promise that they won't do that. So even more difficult than the practical problems are the philosophical ones. I think it's been traditional to look at the changes in our culture through the twin prisms of decades and I guess what you would describe as youth culture. The 60s and the hippies, the 70s and punk, the new romantics of 80s, dance music in the 90s. Music, though, is no longer the harbinger of cultural change. It's just entertainment. It's been reduced to that level. The current agent of change is the internet and social networking, and it's wreaking probably the biggest cultural change that we've seen in our culture since the 60s. Not all of that is good. A lot of it is terrible. But is it possible to have the good parts of that without the bad? Is it possible to have the Arab Spring without the sectarian bile and all the websites that I don't need to mention here? Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg told the G8 recently, you can't isolate some things you like on the internet and control things that you don't. And that presents challenges to us all. That's why you see respected commentators like Paul Toynbee of The Guardian, who labels tweets from Iran and Egypt as people power, but tweets and super injunctions in Britain as mob rule. I think the new media landscape and the new culture is going to need some deeper thinking than that. At the heart of the cultural shift is the notion of privacy. Some of us of a certain age look at the online postings of a new generation with the same horror as our parents regarded the excesses of the Rolling Stones or the nihilism of the Sex Pistols. For this generation, privacy has been thrown out the window. They want to share everything, the boring, the dull, the banal, the profound. The edit button has been overridden. It's all out there. But if their own lives are an open book, it's hardly surprising that they regard the others as fodder for speculation, for slagging and for gossip. Does that mean that no one has the right to privacy? It doesn't mean that. It does mean that the right to privacy doesn't need to be given more weight than the public's right to express themselves and to be informed. And it does mean that the right to privacy is affected by the behaviour and decisions of people in the public eye. It does mean that there needs to be more clarity about how such a law can be enforced in the global village of Twitter, etc. If you look at the relationship between the old media and the new, there's an obvious commercial aspect. If newspapers are no longer the place to go for news, why do you go there at all? Newspapers are struggling with the problems caused by the migration of advertising to the internet. Combine that with the migration of news, and you're approaching a nightmare scenario. Some people argue that newspapers present news you can trust, and they're therefore justified in charging a premium price for that. And it's true that newspapers and journalism in print and indeed in broadcast can provide context, analysis and rigour that Twitter and bloggers can't. I mean, in the new field of journalism, Twitter can provide huge amount of eyewitness reports which are really interesting and really great to watch, very good for newspaper organisations as well to use. But right now there's a tipping point when information is widely known and yet it can't be referred to in print or in mainstream broadcasting. As an advertising slogan, by us, not for the new all the news is fit to print, but for all the news we're allowed to print, isn't the greatest advertising slogan known to man. Debate about new and old media within journalism has, up until relatively recently, been focused on the difficulties in creating truly multimedia journalists, and balancing resources between print and online, the need for training, the problems of monetisation. In the Herald building, we used to have different websites. We now have a combined website, heraldinscotland.com, and the initial idea was that the journalist would provide content for print, could also provide content for online. It might be different content, or it might be the same content repackaged in different ways. The problem with that internally, the debate lies along these lines, is newspapers currently, which give us the money which puts food on our tables. If we take resource away from the newspapers into online, you risk damaging the newspapers, and therefore circulation will go down faster than it currently is. You put it onto online, which is not yet monetised, where is the money going to come to make up that shortfall? So, largely, a lot of these problems will be solved at some stage, even if right now the solution isn't clear. I mean, journalists will adapt to the demands of new media. Journalists in our building are tweeting, they're going on Facebook, they're putting stuff on the internet, they're blogging. That's what will happen. Photographers will go out and take video. That's what happens in journalism. People adapt to new technology, and things continue along much the lines that they went before. There will be a new business model. Don't know what it will be, but in all probability, it will still rely on advertising to subsidise journalism, because that's how journalism works. It's not going to pay for itself. It needs some form of outside subsidy to make it viable, and it's probably going to come from advertising on the internet, just as it has done in print. Quite how we do that, I don't know. The iPad offers a lot of opportunities for that, because I think classified advertising is probably lost to us forever. But display advertising on apps is something entirely different. So what won't change though is a new mindset created by the internet. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. I'd expect the next few years to be dominated by attempts to curb the freedom of the internet and attempts to evade those new restrictions. It will have an effect on the morality that is currently dictates our actions and our reactions. It might mean that we have to grow up about sex stories. The law of diminishing returns suggests our interest in these will wane in proportion with the number which are published. Now you've all seen the stream of information which is published in Twitter now about all the super injunctions. I don't know how many newspapers will use that. From the Herald point of view, it's not really our plan to out celebrities week after week, because we made the point with the Ryan Giggs story. So I don't think we need to make the same point with other celebrities named just now. But it does mean when the most common reaction to the latest sex scandal is a yawn, newspapers would have to find a new stream of stories to mine, although exposing hypocrisy and lies will always remain an important strand of what we do. Whatever happens with the debate which will take place over the coming years, and the stories which provoke those debates will be fascinating. We've got years of brilliant stories to look forward to, and each one of those stories will provoke something of the debate that we've seen, which emerged in the wake of our decision to print the Ryan Giggs picture and to identify him in one story. It's an irony that at a time when it's tougher than ever to get into journalism, which I guess you all know, it's tougher than ever to make a living from it and to remain in journalism. There's also a time when journalism is rarely offered such exciting opportunities.